it's evening time. The stars are coming out one by one. The moon is rising slowly over the rooftops. And somewhere, in a little old house at the edge of the kingdom, a story is just beginning. Get cozy. Pull your blanket a little closer. Because tonight is a very special night. Tonight we are going to meet a girl. A girl who was kind when others were cruel. A girl who was gentle when others were harsh. A girl who never gave up, even when everything seemed hopeless. Her name was Cinderella. And she had a secret that nobody knew. Not her stepmother, not her stepsisters, not even the prince. The secret was a tiny white kitten named Snowball. But Snowball was no ordinary kitten, and this is their story. Once upon a time, in a kingdom full of rolling green hills and sparkling rivers, there stood a big old house. The house had tall chimneys and creaky wooden floors, and a garden that had once been beautiful, but was now overgrown and forgotten. Inside that house lived Cinderella. Cinderella had long golden hair that caught the light like sunshine. She had kind blue eyes that always seemed to be looking for something beautiful in the world. And she had the softest, warmest smile you have ever seen. But Cinderella's life was not easy. Her mother had passed away when she was very small, and her father had remarried, a tall, cold woman named Lady Tremaine. Lady Tremaine had 2 daughters of her own, Anastasia and Drizella. And from the very first day they arrived, everything changed. Cinderella was no longer treated like a daughter of the house. She was treated like a servant. Every morning before the sun had even risen, Cinderella was already awake. She lit the fires, she swept the floors, she carried the heavy buckets of water from the well. She cooked the breakfast, she washed the dishes, she ironed the dresses, she polished the shoes. And when she finally finished, her stepsisters would find something else for her to do. Cinderella, my tea is cold. Cinderella, my ribbon is crooked. Cinderella, the floor is dusty again. Cinderella, Cinderella, Cinderella. But here's the thing about Cinderella that made her truly extraordinary. She never complained. Not once. Because no matter how hard the day was, at the end of it, Snowball was always waiting for her. Snowball had appeared one winter morning, 3 years ago. Cinderella had been carrying firewood through the snow when she heard a tiny sound. So small, she almost missed it. Mew. She stopped. She looked around. And there, tucked underneath a frozen rosebush, was the tiniest, most fragile little kitten she had ever seen. White as fresh snow, with enormous silver-gray eyes that looked up at her like 2 little moons. Cinderella set down her firewood immediately. She took off her own scarf, her only warm scarf, and wrapped the kitten inside it. She carried him close to her chest all the way back to the house. She named him Snowball. She hid him in her little attic room up at the very top of the house where her stepmother never came. She fed him scraps from her own plate. She kept him warm. She talked to him every night before she fell asleep. And Snowball grew. He grew into a beautiful, healthy cat with thick white fur and those same silver-gray eyes. And every night when the house was dark and quiet, his paws began to glow. Just faintly, just softly, like tiny stars had been tucked inside his feet. Cinderella had noticed it on the very first night. She had gasped and reached out to touch his paw, and the moment her fingers made contact, she felt something warm and peaceful wash over her, like a hug from the inside. She never told anyone. It was their secret. Now, on the morning our story really begins, something extraordinary happened in the kingdom. A royal messenger rode through every street, every village, every corner of the land. He carried a golden trumpet and a rolled-up scroll sealed with the royal crest. And everywhere he stopped, he read the same announcement in a loud, clear voice. By order of His Majesty the King, a royal grand ball will be held at the palace this Friday evening. Every young lady in the kingdom is hereby invited. Every single one. The kingdom erupted. Girls everywhere squealed with excitement. Mothers rushed to the fabric shops. Seamstresses worked through the night. The whole land buzzed with one question: what will I wear? And in the big old house at the edge of the kingdom, Cinderella heard the announcement too. She was hanging laundry in the garden when the messenger rode past. And for just one moment, just one tiny, fragile moment, her heart lifted. Maybe she could go too. She finished her chores faster than usual that day. She even found an old dress in a trunk in the attic. It had been her mother's. It was pale pink and a little worn, but it was beautiful. She held it up and looked at herself in the small, cracked mirror on the wall. She smiled. Snowball jumped up onto the trunk beside her and purred loudly. "Yes," she whispered to him. "Maybe we can make this work." But then came the stepsisters. Anastasia burst into the attic without knocking. She never knocked. And stopped dead when she saw Cinderella holding the dress. She stared. Then she laughed. "Drizella!" she shrieked. "Come and look at this! Cinderella thinks she's going to the ball!" Drizella appeared in the doorway and immediately burst into laughter too. "You? Going to the ball? Oh, that is the funniest thing I have ever heard." Cinderella lowered the dress slowly. She kept her face calm. She kept her voice steady. "The messenger said every young lady is invited," she said quietly. Anastasia snatched the dress out of her hands. "This was Mother's fabric," she said, examining it. "I could use this for my own gown." And before Cinderella could say a single word, Anastasia tore a long strip from the skirt. Drizella grabbed the sleeve, and within moments, the dress was ruined. Cinderella stood very still. She did not cry. She did not shout. She just stood there, holding what was left of her mother's dress, while her stepsisters walked away laughing. That evening, Lady Tremaine came to find her. "You will not be attending the ball," she said simply. "There is too much work to be done. The floors need scrubbing, the fireplaces need cleaning, and my daughter's dresses need pressing. Twice." She turned and left without another word. Cinderella sat down on the floor of the attic. She looked at the ruined dress in her hands, and for the first time in a very long time, she let herself cry. Snowball was beside her in an instant. He climbed into her lap. He pressed his small, warm head against her chest, and his paws began to glow, brighter than she had ever seen them glow before. Cinderella looked down at him through her tears. "Snowball," she whispered, "what is happening?" And then the room changed. It started as a shimmer, like heat rising from summer cobblestones. Then the shimmer became a glow, and the glow became a light, and the light gathered itself together in the corner of the attic room, and slowly, gently, took the shape of a woman. She was small, barely taller than Cinderella herself. She wore a dress the color of moonlight and carried a thin silver wand. Her hair was white, and her eyes were the exact same silver gray as Snowball's. Cinderella scrambled to her feet. Who are you?" she breathed. The woman smiled. It was the warmest smile Cinderella had ever seen, warmer even than her own. "I am someone who has been watching over you," said the woman softly, "for a very long time. Your little Snowball called for me tonight. He has been calling for me every night for 3 years, but tonight his call was strong enough for me to come through." She looked at Snowball with great tenderness. "He loves you very much," she said, "more than you know." Cinderella looked down at Snowball. He was sitting perfectly upright, his glowing paws tucked neatly beneath him, watching the woman with calm silver eyes. "I am your fairy godmother," said the woman, "and tonight, we have work to do." What happened next was something Cinderella would remember for the rest of her life. Her fairy godmother raised her wand, and she began. The ruined dress lifted from the floor on its own. It spun slowly in the air, the torn fabric knitting itself back together, the pale pink deepening and shifting until it became the most breathtaking shade of blue, soft and deep and shimmering, like the sky just after sunset. Cinderella reached out and touched it. The fabric felt like water, like moonlight, like a dream. Then her fairy godmother pointed the wand at Cinderella's feet, and there, where her worn old shoes had been, stood a pair of shoes made entirely of crystal. They caught the light from Snowball's glowing paws and scattered it across the walls in 1,000 tiny rainbows. Cinderella could not speak. She looked at herself in the cracked mirror. and she barely recognized the girl looking back at her. But her fairy godmother held up one finger. "Listen carefully," she said. "The magic will last until midnight. When the clock strikes 12, the gown will fade, the shoes will disappear, and everything will return to what it was. You must leave the ball before midnight, do you understand?" Cinderella nodded. "And one more thing," said her fairy godmother, glancing at Snowball. "He cannot come with you tonight, but he will be here when you return. He is always here." Cinderella knelt down and pressed her forehead gently against Snowball's. He purred so loudly the whole attic seemed to vibrate. "I'll be back before midnight," she whispered to him. "I promise." The palace was more beautiful than anything Cinderella had ever imagined. Hundreds of candles blazed in crystal chandeliers. The floors were white marble, polished to a mirror shine. Music floated through every corridor, soft and sweet and swirling. And everywhere she looked, there were flowers. Roses and lilies and jasmine, filling the air with the most extraordinary perfume. Cinderella walked in slowly, and the room went quiet. Not completely quiet, but there was a ripple, a turning of heads, a pause in conversations, a collective intake of breath. Because there was something about this girl in the blue gown that was different from everyone else in the room. Something that had nothing to do with her dress or her crystal shoes. It was the way she looked at everything, with such wonder, such genuine, open, unguarded wonder, like someone who had never stopped noticing how beautiful the world could be. The prince noticed it immediately. He was standing on the far side of the ballroom with his advisors, looking, if we are honest, rather bored. He had been to many balls. He had met many people, and he had never once felt that particular feeling, that feeling of the world suddenly becoming more interesting. Until now. He crossed the room. He bowed. "May I have this dance?" he asked. And Cinderella smiled. They danced for what felt like hours. They talked, really talked. The way you talk to someone when you forget to be nervous, when you forget to be careful, when you just are. They talked about the kingdom, and about books, and about the garden Cinderella had always dreamed of planting. The prince told her about the stars. He had studied them since he was a boy. Cinderella told him about Snowball, though she did not mention the glowing paws. The prince laughed when she described how Snowball knocked things off shelves deliberately and then looked completely innocent. "He sounds extraordinary," said the prince. "He is," said Cinderella. "He is the best friend I have ever had." The prince looked at her for a long moment. "I think," he said quietly, "that you are the most remarkable person I have ever met." Cinderella felt warmth rise in her chest. Not the magic warmth from Snowball's paws. Something different. Something new. And then, bong, the clock. Cinderella's eyes went wide. Bong, bong. She pulled back from the prince. "I have to go," she said quickly. "Wait." He reached for her hand. "Please, I don't even know your name." Bong, bong, bong. She ran. Through the ballroom, through the corridor, down the great marble staircase, and on the very last step, her foot slipped, and one crystal shoe stayed behind on the cold white marble. She didn't stop. She ran all the way to the palace gates, and the moment she passed through them, the gown faded. The remaining shoe disappeared. She was Cinderella again, in her plain dress, breathing hard in the cold night air. Bong, bong, bong. 12. She walked home through the quiet streets, and when she climbed the stairs to her attic room, Snowball was sitting exactly where she had left him, waiting, his paws glowing softly in the dark. She scooped him up and held him close. "I danced," she whispered into his fur. "I actually danced." Snowball purred. The next morning, the whole kingdom was talking about one thing. The prince had announced that he would search every house in the land. He had the crystal shoe, and he would find the girl whose foot it fit.
because he had decided, with complete certainty, that she was the person he wanted to spend his life with. Cinderella heard this news while she was scrubbing the kitchen floor. She sat back on her heels. She looked at Snowball, who was watching her from the windowsill. "Do you think he'll come here?" she whispered. Snowball blinked his silver eyes slowly, which, if you know anything about cats, means yes. He came that afternoon. The royal carriage rolled up to the big old house. The stepsisters nearly knocked each other over trying to get to the door first. Lady Tremaine smoothed her dress and arranged her face into something resembling a smile. The prince's attendant carried the crystal shoe on a velvet cushion.
Anastasia tried it first. She pushed and shoved and went red in the face. It did not fit. Drizella tried next. She squeezed and grimaced and nearly toppled over. It did not fit. The attendant looked around the room. "Is there anyone else?" he asked. Lady Tremaine opened her mouth to say no. But from the top of the stairs came a soft voice. "Yes," said Cinderella. "There is me." Lady Tremaine's face went white. The stepsisters stared. The prince, who had come himself, unable to wait, looked up. And he saw her. Not the gown, not the crystal shoes, just her. The girl with the golden hair and the kind blue eyes, and that particular way of looking at the world. He knew immediately. Cinderella walked down the stairs slowly. She sat down. The attendant knelt and placed the crystal shoe on her foot. It fit perfectly. The room was completely silent. And then Cinderella reached into her pocket and drew out the other shoe, the one that had disappeared at midnight and then somehow reappeared on her attic floor that morning, left there by a fairy godmother who wanted to make sure the story ended properly. She looked at the prince. He looked at her. And he smiled. The same smile she had seen on the dance floor. Warm and real and completely unguarded. "Hello again," he said softly. "Hello," said Cinderella. And so, Cinderella went to live at the palace. She planted the most extraordinary garden the kingdom had ever seen, full of roses and wildflowers, and a little fountain where birds came to drink every morning. Her stepmother and stepsisters were not punished. Cinderella would not allow it. She simply moved on. Because that is what truly strong people do. And Snowball? Snowball came to the palace too, of course. He had his own velvet cushion by the fireplace in Cinderella's room. He knocked things off shelves and looked completely innocent. He purred so loudly that guests in the next corridor could hear him. And every night, when the palace was quiet and the candles had burned low, his paws glowed softly in the dark. Just like always. Just like magic. Shh. The story is over now, little one. Cinderella is sleeping in her beautiful room, with Snowball curled up warm at her feet. The prince is sleeping too. The whole kingdom is sleeping. And now, it's your turn. Close your eyes. Feel how warm and safe and cozy you are right now. You are loved. Just like Cinderella was loved. Just like Snowball knew all along. Good night. Sweet dreams. See you next time.